we'll start with some fun rapid-fire questions, but quick one answer, one-word answer. So what was your first car? Sandy.
Volkswagen Bug 68.
Good here. Carmen?
Volkswagen Rabbit 70.
Okay.
It was older than I was.
Very cool, very cool. And your first job, so, the first job you were paid for. Sandy.
Nursing home kitchen worker.
I was a student aide for migrant children during the summer.
Awesome. First concert you ever went to?
Harriet will know this. The Monkees.
We all know them.
Janet Jackson.
Awesome. Awesome. Your favorite drink of choice? Alcoholic, non-alcoholic? Your choice.
In the summertime, a dry rosé.
Tequila neat with an orange wedge.
Fancy. Favorite food that you always go back for?
This was hard. Meatloaf.
Classic.
My mom's enchiladas.
Awesome. You are both crazy busy, but what's one activity you do at least each week, hopefully, that you do just for yourself?
I take a long walk.
I make jewelry.
And last but not least, your favorite memory of the U of O?
My junior year abroad in Germany.
Studying late night during finals week at the EMU.
Awesome. So, again, just fun little things to get the conversation started. Thank you for participating, and now we know what drinks to buy you. Awesome. So, let me just kind of kick it off with a little bit more of the in-depth questions. But to begin with, we know that you're accomplished. We know you're at the top of the organization, but there are other people who may be aspiring to where you are now. And beyond the title, it's not necessarily clear what your organization does or what it is you yourself do. So can you take a moment to do this two-part question? One, tell us a little bit more about Latino Network, Portland Business Alliance, and then also sort of what fills your day. So maybe, Carmen, if you want to kick that off.
Sure. So Latino Network started off in 1996, and it's kind of a misnomer for what we do now. We actually did start as a network of Latino leaders that used to come together, folks that worked in private sector, public sector, nonprofit, used to come around a table for lunch and share information about the growing Latino community back in the mid-90s. And over time, it served more of a convener role and brought more and more leaders together and had an ability to influence decision makers around these policies. Probably in 2007 or 8, one of our longstanding nonprofits closed their doors, so Latino Network stepped in to not only a convener advocacy role, but then also a service role. So we now provide services for about 7,100 Latino youth and families in the Multnomah County and Washington County area.
And Carmen has built it into what it is today. She's done a phenomenal job there. The Portland Business Alliance is our region's chamber of commerce. We represent about 1,900 businesses in the Portland, Vancouver area, and they range from Intel, the largest private employer in Oregon, to 1- and 2-person businesses all over the region. We also operate Downtown Clean and Safe. One of my Clean and Safe board members is here, Lomax. And we do cleaning and security in this area and others. And my favorite program is our Homeless to Work program, where we work with Central City Concern to put people who have been homeless, to give them, after they've gotten housing and frequently drug and alcohol counseling, their first job as they become more self-sufficient. So you see them out on the street and cleaning, and I always ask people to tell them thank you. And we do all kinds of things. I said the other day, what I love about my job is I don't know what I'm going to do when I go to work and the phone rings. It could be about complex tax policy that we're working on down in Salem, or it could be about garbage cans in downtown Portland, and they're both very important. Another really big issue we work on downtown, and I'm not making this up, is bird poop. We've been dealing with the bird poop issue for quite a while, right? Tough issue.
wonderful. And just as a follow-up, those are great examples of what it is you do. Could you tell us a little bit more about how those things are done? How much is it you? How much is it in partnership? How much of it is persuasion? How much of it is coalition building? What fills your day, and what kind of perhaps keeps you up at night, both for exciting things but also for stress?
I'll start with the last one because I've been working for a long time, and I don't let things keep me up at night. It's a job. I decided a long time ago that the only thing that I would worry about enough to wake up in the middle of the night was family, and I found it's really important to make those separations. And it's a job. I love it, but it's my job. My family is much more important than that. I have 3 boards of phenomenal volunteers who are engaged in the community. They set the policy and direction. I have a phenomenal staff of about 30 people and many, many partners. And honestly, when we get to something where we're moving forward with an issue or a cause, it's the result of a lot of conversation with many, many people coming together to talk it through and deciding what the best course of action is. So I spend a huge amount of time in City Hall. I'm down in Salem, constantly working, and I would say the key to our success is partnership, and it's frankly a new set of partners all the time. It keeps evolving, but that's what makes us successful.
I would echo that because of the nature of our work, we are only successful because of our partnerships. A little bit more about what we do. We have a continuum of services providing services from like pre-K services. We're in about 37 schools in Washington County and also in Multnomah County. We provide rent assistance and heating assistance for those who can't afford it, emergency services, youth violence prevention and gang intervention services, and then we also do advocacy. We've more recently started an advocacy arm that is really strong in a 501c4 so that it can better support our work. Increasingly, as you do more service kind of work and working with school districts and community partners like the Portland Business Alliance and other entities, the government, we were finding that we were getting frustrated because you can only do so much in the service. We wanted to go more upstream and have an ability to influence where the decisions get made at a more strategic level. So that's the newest area that we're getting into, and PBA has been a great partner. There are great places where we come together and align, like around education. We partner with other advocacy organizations around things that we care about, jobs, or issues around student access, things like that. But day to day is pretty much, as we've grown over time. When I started the job, we had probably less than a dozen employees, and now we have between 135 and 150, depending on the time of the year, whether it's summer programs or during the school year when we're probably most active. So because it's been such a wild ride in terms of growth over the last 8 years for me, it's been a different kind of job every single year, which has been great. But what I change about and what I stay up at night has really changed over time. And Malcolm knows this, he's our banker, but I used to worry about payroll in the early days, like making payroll and making sure that we had enough cash flow coming in and that we were getting those invoices out so that we could keep doing the great work we're doing. And now I've settled. I don't get super alarmed. We have good systems in place. But I would think the most pressing issue now for me is how do we retain the excellent staff that we've developed over the years? How do we continue to make this a more challenging place for them to work so that they want to invest their time and really see a future for their growth and development here? So it's a pretty full job. There's a lot of time demands, but I also get energized about the opportunity to share about the work we do and develop new great ideas with other partners.
Can I add to that? Carmen and I both run nonprofits, and both of us stepped into our organizations during difficult transitional times and payroll worries. I'd worked in large corporations most of my career and had never had the experience of thinking, how am I going to pay my people next week? And those are really, really hard and incredibly educational, and they teach you how to move your organization to have the good cash flow and that fundamental financial basis is so important, and you've got to get that stabilized and going so that you can grow and serve your clients, your members, and maintain employees. So frequently we'll all get together, and I don't know about you, but I see new people stepping into nonprofit jobs, and they're looking at this issue and saying, how am I going to survive? And I go, you just have to ride it out, but get your finances in order.
Wonderful. So, Sandy, you mentioned your previous work. And so I think that I'd like to segue to how you got here, because many people in this room may be mid-career and they're aspiring to a leadership position, or they're just even wondering, is it right for them? We obviously have great folks like David and Ken who are early in their career, and maybe the question they have is, how do they support their eventual boss's boss? So can you talk a little bit more about your career path? The winding roads, the interesting roads that brought you to where you are now.
Well, I decided I wanted to be a newspaper reporter when I was about 12 years old, and I was on the high school paper, went to U of O, majored in journalism, had a German degree as well from that year in Germany, and was on the Oregon Daily Emerald staff, and was incredibly lucky. I'd always had summer jobs, and the summer I graduated, I didn't know how to look for a real job, so I got a summer job at the Oregonian as an intern, and at the end of the internship, they offered to keep me on for a little while longer as a temporary, and I did that and ended up as a permanent employee. One of my colleagues used to call me the oldest living intern at the Oregonian. Went from there to the Seattle Times, and I've had incredible luck. And whenever people ask me about my career path, I tell them the best career advice I ever got was when I was at the Oregonian, and we had a colleague who ran our DC office. He was a great guy and a phenomenal reporter, and he came out to Portland one summer, and I was at that point stationed in Salem, and he took me out to lunch and told me he was leaving the paper. Well, this was my end-all be-all job. I just didn't know why anybody would want to leave this phenomenal job as a reporter for the Oregonian, and he said, I believe you stay in a job as long as you're learning something, and when you feel like you've reached the point where you're not learning anymore, it's time to look for a new opportunity. Well, his name was Bill Keller, and he went on to be the editor of the New York Times. So he followed his own advice pretty darn well. Still a phenomenal guy. And that's really how I've applied my career decisions is I go to jobs. I was a newspaper reporter for about 10 years, the Oregonian and then the Seattle Times, and had a phenomenal job. Being a reporter is like getting a master's degree. You get to learn about a lot of different things and had the opportunity to cover very complex issues over that time. But I got a little bored and I didn't really know what to do. So I went out and talked to former reporters who had great jobs. I went all over the country. People introduced me to folks. And a guy here in Portland named Bill Robertson said, I want you to come work here. He was at Pacific Power at the time. I'd known him in his earlier career. And I went to work for him. I didn't even know what the job was. I just knew I was going to work for this phenomenally smart person who was building a new team. And that got me into the energy business. I reported on it, and I stayed there in that industry, 2 different companies for 20 years. And my career path wasn't always straight up. I learned you have to step sideways to go up. And so I kept looking for that new challenge. I had things thrown at me that I never thought I would do. I remember my boss one day in my second place coming by and saying, I think it's time that we promoted you. We're going to make you vice president. But in order to be a vice president, you can't just be in charge of what I call arts and crafts, communications and government relations. You're going to also be in charge of purchasing and facilities management and get this whole big crew of people reporting to you. And it was great. I learned a lot. And then I did that for a long time. And then this job, the company I was in was a California-based energy company, very large business, and it was in the middle of the California energy crisis, and I was in our national business, and you all remember the Enron thing. There were a lot of companies caught up in that whole crisis, including the one I worked for, and we had a bankruptcy. We had a couple of bankruptcies. Ours was really an insolvency, and we sold the Portland-based business that I was actually doing a national job at that point, but I was attached here in Portland. And the Portland-based business was sold. My job went away. Frankly, I was thrilled. I was ready to not do that anymore. Bankruptcy is really not fun. I was on the board of the Portland Business Alliance, and somebody said, "Why don't you apply for that job?" And no woman had ever had the job. And so I thought, well, I'll apply, but they're not going to give it to me. And I did, and it's been an incredible learning experience. So I've been opportunistic. I've been looking for another place to grow. And I've had people who have opened doors for me that I never would have thought about.
So my interest first in going to U of O, I actually thought I was going to be a journalism major as well. And then I took, as a freshman, Intro to Chicano Studies, and it totally changed my whole perspective about myself, about my sense of place in this country, and about our history here of activism and what I think I wanted to do. So it really got me motivated to join like student groups on campus. I joined the MECHA group. I was very active in the university, or the government. I'm totally spacing out on the acronym. ASUO, thank you. How could I forget? And served, on the EMU board for a while. Then that led to getting active as a volunteer on campaigns. And shortly after graduation, I had the opportunity to work on, volunteering for local campaigns, and then I was hired onto my first campaign right out of college, or not too long out of college, and it was for a Latina who was running for her first office here at the county. Her name's Serena Cruz, and she was, now that I remember, she was very young to run. She was older than me, so she felt older, but she was, I think she was like 29 or 30, running for this county seat. She was the first Latina to ever run locally and win, and so that was a big deal for me and for the folks that I represented, and that was a really great learning experience. I learned really quickly about how to do field work. I was a field director, which was a very fancy title for volunteer coordinator of a 2-person shop. So it was, but I learned a lot, and I learned how to recruit volunteers and how to look at the map of the county and the city differently, how to cut turf, and how to actually get up and get donuts and be out there at 6 a.m., being super motivated for your candidate. I also got to meet a lot of great people, and after she won, I had the opportunity to work for her, which just opened my eyes more to county issues and issues that were impacting our communities locally, particularly those that were underserved. So shortly after working for Serena, I spent some time in Seattle at the University of Washington studying, but then I left early before I finished my studies to work on another campaign, and then I was just sucked back into Portland, which is a city I love. I eventually worked for 3 other elected officials on their campaigns or on their staff. Most recently at the city, worked for Nick Fish, who just won re-election just a couple nights ago. And after working for several years in government, also felt like, I have this energy to do something more and differently. It was incredible experience working for elected officials. I had a chance to become a generalist on a bunch of different issues, so and meet a lot of great people, learned what was super, working very well, what things were really not working well. And at the same time, I had this feeling in me that as a representative of your elected, you represent your elected all the time. That is your role, to operationalize what their vision is and their goals and help move that agenda. And I was feeling like I wanted to do more, and you can't do more when you're on a staff side, on the government side. So that's when I moved into this position. I was also on the board of Latino Network, which was then a very small organization, and they were experiencing some challenges. And so my fellow board members encouraged me to pursue this path, and I jumped into it not knowing anything about nonprofits, and really with a huge learning curve. And it felt, awkward and uncomfortable, and there was no director currently, so I had no transition. I had to call 5 people to let me in the door the first day because no one was in the office. The office was out of this little tiny house, in North Portland. It was an actual house they were using as an office. And so you do sometimes have to go back or step to the side sometimes to kind of get to where you have a vision for something to be. And this was a great example, but I also knew it was an example or an opportunity for me to step out from behind someone and actually learn something and learn how to speak in my own voice and use my voice to advance things that I felt that I believed in were important. So over the last few years, we've really developed this organization into something that I hope is advancing the work of our collective community together. And our goal is to really make sure that we build influence so that people can use this vehicle as a voice to advocate for things where otherwise they wouldn't have had that ability to do so.
Wonderful. So, with both Sandy and Carmen, I gave them some sample questions just to help them organize their thoughts. This is not one of them. But their conversation really made me think of, they are both accomplished, influential, they're amazing people contributing to the impact. And I think you each have a voice. Can you talk about finding your voice? Right? Because, Sandy, you mentioned you were the first woman in the Portland Business Alliance position. So that may have been a very interesting situation when you found yourself, getting the opportunity, but maybe, in a different environment. And then Carmen talking about, Chicano studies and, oh my gosh, a new identity, sort of revelation. So can you talk a little bit more about just, what this process has been to find your voice in the places that you are working and outside even? So either one.
Well, I spent 20 years in the energy business, which is a field that is dominated by engineers and accountants, and those are mostly men. So by the time I got to the Portland Business Alliance, I was very accustomed to being the only woman in the room. Even when I was a reporter and I was covering energy and other things, I'm not a real sports person. And I'd go to meetings sometimes and I would look at the paper and pick out one sentence of sports, because I found if I threw out one sentence of sports, the conversation would start and I'd be one of the guys. And I think that's probably what I learned first, is that it was okay to be who I was. And, I'm not a guy. I'm not a man. When, I grew up started working in the 70s and went into the 80s and, went to this corporate job, and I went out and bought those little suits with the little ties, and I think I lasted in those for about 3 days, because that's not who I am. And stepping out and figuring out how to be who you are and bring that to the table and understand the value. And what I was a woman in business who, and I am who I am. No, I'm not like every other woman I worked with, even though, in those days, because we didn't have a lot of role models. There weren't a lot of women who were before us. And we networked pretty strong. I have great women friends who I got to know over the years in the corporate world, and learned some things on my own, frankly, I learned it the hard way. The whole pay equity issue and the whole Me Too movement, I lived through a lot of that. I think most of the women I know have had experience, and I learned, and I counsel a lot of young women today, that women are terrible at negotiating for money, and we have to learn how to be better than that. And we have to ask, and we have to step up and define what our value is as co-equals at the table. And, I learned that by realizing that I had pay equity issues that were impacting me. So my voice I've learned that it has to be what I am, and I'm in now a very, very public job. I'm retiring from that job this summer. I'm going to do something else, and people ask me what I'm looking forward to in my retirement, and one of them is I never want to be on television again. I'm really tired of that. But again, I've found that I'm more authentic when I am speaking about who I am, and from my reality, I'm representing the business community here. But I'm doing it as somebody who was born and raised here. I'm a single mom. I went to college because I had financial aid. I really care about getting kids from modest families like I was to college, and I think that authenticity is what has enabled me to do what I do, and to learn from the lessons I've had over the years.
I would say that's very good advice, and also the authenticity is really critical. And I also it was a process for me to get comfortable with my authentic voice. I grew up here in Oregon. My family was a migrant family from Texas and New Mexico and Mexico. And so our family was first generation settled out in Washington County, and I was the first in my family to go to college. So I say that just to give context about my sense of self and my voice as representing my family and feeling the pressure of not letting my family down, being the first in my family to go to college, but also being at U of O and not really feeling like I really belonged there for a good while. And so once I was there, so that's why that class that I went to was so pivotal for me, because it gave me a sense that I did belong here. There are scholars that write about the history of a community that I am a part of, and that was a new thing for me. So it gave me the motivation to find my voice and find ways to lift up my experience as valid in this state and in this community. Working for elected officials, I entered another space where I felt like there weren't very many people with my background in that political world at that time. That's definitely changing, which is really cool. But back then, there were very few of us, and so I struggle to find my comfort with lifting my story out in a space that didn't feel like maybe it would be fully understood, or maybe it wouldn't be accepted. And so I struggled with that sense for a while, but definitely got comfortable as I went along and saw that, no, these kinds of different stories can be very powerful in public policy, can be very challenging to hear sometimes, but also it moves the agenda forward for all of us. It makes it more inclusive. It makes it a more representative system for all of us. So I think in those ways, those were lessons. There were opportunities that really spoke to me, and I took those opportunities with great mentorship and support from the bosses that I've had, from the colleagues that were encouraging and supportive and made it easier to do so, or showed that there was value in hearing new perspective and bringing that perspective and holding it up. But I think it really changed for me when I actually transitioned from working, again, behind the scenes for someone, supporting their voice, right? And then to actually leading an organization. And that felt a lot riskier, personally riskier, because then you are, the one that's on television or quoted in the paper, and all of a sudden people want to ascribe a lot of meaning behind what you're saying as representing an entire community in this state, and that's a lot of pressure. And then we get feedback always from people within our community or outside who always have some strong opinions, either in support or not in support of what you said. So you can never please anyone, and I think that's the best thing I can say, or advice I can offer, is like, don't let that stop you from using your voice, because there will always be a critic, and you just got to get comfortable with that. And actually, it just makes you more comfortable in your sense of self and using your voice. So it's been a process, but I think it's getting better.
Thank you both so much for sharing. I've got some more prepared questions, but I'd like to actually take a break and pass the mic around for people who have questions, and then we'll wrap up with some additional questions if we don't address anything that I have on this list. So AP has graciously volunteered to help run the microphone around. So what kind of questions do you have for Sandy and Carmen? Once again, we're family. So, no question, respectful, is off limits. So please raise your hand, and AP will help me pass this microphone.
So my question, you had mentioned you'll stay at a job as long as you're learning, and I work in the training and development department, and so part of our challenge right now is retention with my organization. I'm sure that's similar for a lot of people in the room. So I'm kind of curious if you could talk a little bit more about kind of what that looks like, or what things have been successful for you, both in both different fields of work that you've been in.
Well, money is very important. I had the most bizarre conversation with somebody a few weeks ago where we were talking about some retention issues, and I said, well, we should be looking at some salary, whether there's a salary adjustment. And this person said, oh, I don't think you use money to retain people. And I'm like, what planet do you live on? You know, money isn't, and it is important. And if we pretend that money isn't important, then we're missing the boat. And I think that, you know, in a large organization, it's harder to make the kinds of adjustments that I can make and Carmen can make within our own budgets when we have room. So I'm never going to say that's not important, but the kind of work environment you create for people and give them those opportunities to take some risk, walk them to the edge of the cliff, don't let them go over, but let them learn, let them make mistakes, let them see that there's a path forward. But I'm going to tell you something. I've managed people for a long, long time, and I'm a boss who will go to some of the young people who work for me and tap them on the shoulder and say, you know, it's time for you to be thinking about what you're going to do next. And I want to help you make that transition. We're a small organization. There aren't a lot of opportunities for you to go to the next step here. So where can you go someplace else to learn? And I think as employers, we have to understand that that's our obligation. That's how people need to see, especially young people, need to see a path forward to continue growing. Otherwise, they're going to lose interest. And so in our organization, we try to create a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities, but also understand that we won't hold on to people forever. And we help them make those transitions.
Agreed. Money is important. And as a nonprofit, it's really challenging because we are often at a disadvantage. We don't have that ability to just quickly make those adjustments or gestures or signing bonuses or things that make attractive offers to really, you know, compelling candidates. What we've learned how to do, though, is to try and really focus on organizational culture to make it a place that people want to work or want to stay. And where we can't do, you know, maybe the salary, you know, what we really need is a senior level, for example, a senior level HR person, but our budget only allows for a mid-level, you know, so we have to get creative about what else we have to offer. So we try as much as we can to offer really good insurance, really great holiday opportunities, great professional development opportunities. And sometimes when we have had a particularly rough or busy time, or you know, or it's been an extraordinary amount of time that staff has had to go all in for the organization, we'll do something like we'll just give them a day off, a Friday off, so that they can, you know, so we try to find ways to show appreciation as much as possible. And there is a dynamic now in our organization because we work in schools. We attract a lot of young people this is their first job. And so this is their training ground. This is their first job, their first ability to interact with, you know, a hierarchy, you know, an employment hierarchy, and understanding how to work with their peers or work with other departments. So we have pretty consistently young folks that work for us 2 years and then they go on to grad school. So we've just learned to embrace that. That is something, at first it was frustrating because you invest a lot of time in training and they're great people, but they're so motivated to do the next thing that they go on to grad school or something else. So we're now exploring, okay, let's partner with a local university, or, you know, let's see if we can incent them to come here and use this as an opportunity to springboard. Let's just own it. You know, what can we do to make it attractive and to be responsive to this generation who's looking for something more? So I think it's about just being responsive and just adapting your organization within the constraints that you have. It definitely, money definitely helps, and, you know, and culture, I think, is another piece of that.
I want to add to what Carmen said about those entry-level jobs. We very consciously keep some jobs open for recent college grads. In fact, I have 2 great Duck alum in our 2 jobs right now and they're both just like 2 years out of college. And it's not easy when you're, you know, in charge, because you're teaching them how to do their jobs. But it gives them the opportunity to learn and to start seeing what a career path looks like. I think it's really important that employers do that. And the other thing I have found is that if you're flexible about what a job looks like, you can attract great people. I had the same issue that Carmen had, where I needed some good HR help, but I couldn't afford a top quality HR person. So I hired a 3-day-a-week top quality HR person and got what I needed that way. And I did that with a few jobs where I needed the best, but I couldn't afford it. So if you are thoughtful about what a job looks like, you can attract different kinds of people and even keep them longer as well.
Thank you so much.
A quick follow-up to that. I agree with everything you say word for word up there. The past 6 months or so, I've been trying to drive a change in our bonus structure so that there's a heavy piece of it is personal growth and continuous improvement. And so to follow up what you guys were just saying, how do you respond to the employees that have zero drive and zero growth ambitions when you're trying to, really drive a continuous improvement culture? My initial response is I just immediately write them off, and that's not the mature way to go about it. But what is how do you approach those type of employees?
Sure. We have a bonus structure. Again, 20 years in very traditional corporations. I came in and the organization I inherited didn't do performance appraisals, which blew my mind, and didn't have any sort of incentive pay. Now, we're a business organization, so we're more likely to be looking at that. And we have a structure where everybody from the receptionist to me has opportunity to earn a bonus, and it's driven by our financial results. So very classic kind of business-looking one. You know what? Back in those corporate days, and I went to all kinds of training programs on how you build team, and what I learned is that the successful teams that you have, not everybody is going to be the same, and you have a better team if you have different kinds of personalities on the team, and different motivations, different work styles, because you all complement each other. And God forbid that you ever work someplace where everybody's like me, because that would not be very fun. And I'm thinking of a woman on my team who is, frankly, one of the smartest people in our operation. She's very, very good at her job on one level, but she has some characteristics that make it so that it would be difficult to promote her to the next level. And we've talked to her about that and said, if you went and did some development in this area, you would be more likely to be promoted to the next level. And she's just not interested. She loves what she does. She's paid relatively okay, and that's what she wants to do. So I look at it and go, what I need from her right now is what she is doing, and she does that very well. So we have other people who are kind of the same, where they do their jobs very well, and they're not really anxious to go to that next level. And I certainly wouldn't want everybody like that. So I think it's a balance where you look at them, and if you have performance standards, and if they're meeting the standards and contributing to the organization, then that works, as long as there's a balance.
We have a similar situation. There are some folks in our organization that really are just content. They've been talked to or coached about if they want to move up, this is what they need to do. Some folks are just content and they like their work-life balance, and that's just working for them right now. Where it can change is if it's no longer working for us. There have been times where we've gone through the growth spurt, and what did work for us at that point in time, and it's not no fault of the employee at all, but the organization changed and the culture changed and the job demands changed. And so then suddenly it was no longer the right match. And that's when we have those discussions, and we love to coach people into another position that's better for them and work with them if they've been really great employees, so they see it as something, positive. But there are those times too where, we have recently started using employee climate assessments and letting the team share how they feel. And when data's data, so we have asked staff, okay, how do you want to feel appreciated? Like, there are bonuses, there are this or that. And most folks said, yeah, bonuses are nice, pay increases are nice, but we want to feel appreciated. We want, more team time together. We like the bonuses, but we like them tied to things that we're doing exceptionally, so that people don't feel like it's just something they automatically get. People want to feel that their specific contribution matters and is seen. And so we do have a bonus structure as well, and we give it mostly based on incidents that are, or acts that are above and beyond. So it's not something that folks expect. It's not that there's not an entitlement, and there's broad agreement in the organization around that criteria. They told us that that's what they wanted. So that gives us a good basis. So there's a lot of buy-in for that. But yeah, there are those times, and I think it's the perpetual challenge.
Okay, I figured since there's quite a younger alumni here, this might help out a little bit. I know we obviously all learn from our mistakes and we grow from them, but if you could go back in time and tell your younger self or improve, or I guess kind of give yourself advice, what would that be?
I would say probably don't be so insecure about your own abilities. Be really confident that you have, there's wisdom and expertise in your youth that you bring. That I think maybe might not be appreciated at the time, but you'll reflect back and know that you brought a really great perspective and new ideas.
I would say pick who you work with, not who you work for. That the learning that I have had over the years, I've had some phenomenal bosses and incredible colleagues, and I've learned so much, and people who've worked for me, and I've learned from all of them. And, I want to, when I get up and go to work, I want to be there, and I want to be around the people I work with. I want to have fun. I want to feel valued. And if I'm in a place where I don't feel that way, it's time to move on. And I'm very thoughtful about that. With the people I work with now every day, but I probably had one person who I would say was a very important mentor in my life, who taught me a lot about how to do the job that I do. But other than that, I've had many, many people I've had what I like to think of as mentoring moments, where I've sat with them and saw them do something or heard them say something, and I've filed it, and I thought, that's really important. I've got to remember that and replicate that in my way. And, it's from people that I've worked with around, either directly as colleagues or in my interactions in the community and in my industries. So,
Thank you.
I'm going to add one more, too, that you made me think of. When you're coming up in your career, you're going to meet a lot of people professionally. It might be the receptionist. It might be a staffer that's a very entry level, or an intern in another office. Keep your relationships, because those relationships, these are going to be organizational leaders or industry leaders or consultants. It's random, but you're going to work with all these people again. You're going to cross paths multiple times. So one of the biggest lessons I've learned is what might feel like a big conflict, or if you conflict around a work issue or whatever, it's don't take it personal, because you're going to work with these people again, I guarantee you. And you want to have that avenue open so that you can come around together again around the things that you do agree on, that you can work together in. So that's something I learned by trial and error. So that's something I'd offer.
and I now need to add to that because now Carmen and I both work in and around politics and have for many years. And I've always told people that that relationship, and it's true anywhere you work, that relationship is really important, so that when you talk to people, you always have to be in a place of respect. Even if you disagree with what they have to say to you, you have to be respectful and hear what they have to say and hope that they're respectful and hear what you have to say, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be walking through that door again and having another conversation about something else. And you always have to have a place where you can do that. And then the other thing I watch for is I hire people and work with people is how they approach folks. And I always counsel people to approach every person you meet as a place of an equal. And that is whether it is the receptionist or the CEO. You put yourself at a place of an equal in terms of how you feel around them and how you're treating them. Because that human interaction at the end of the day is what people remember. And so you've got to value who you are and understand they're human beings like you, but also value the person that you see. And if somebody comes into my operation and treats my junior level people differently than they treat me, that resonates with me and it stays with me for a very long time because we value everybody the same.
All right, so at this point, we are getting close to the 9 o'clock hour. I was going to ask a final question, but actually that was a perfect way to round it out. And obviously when Sandy and Carmen are just adding to each other's comments, you know they're getting going. The program is not over, but I do want to be respectful for those of you who have to move on to your next obligation. So at this point, first, please join me in a round of applause for Sandy and Carmen.